This story begins with a brutal betrayal. Suho, our protagonist, a skilled swordsman, was on his knees in front of a group of people he once called comrades. His body was trembling, and his arm showed clear signs of being poisoned. He coughed violently, his breath shallow and rough, and it didn't take long for him to realize this wasn't just any normal poison. It was something far more dangerous, possibly fatal. In front of him stood two of his teammates, and instead of helping him, they laughed. They actually found joy in watching him suffer. One of them, a warrior, sneered and said Suho should have joined their plan. But Suho had chosen a different path. He remained loyal to his duties as a public servant, stubbornly holding onto his morals instead of giving in to corruption. This team had just finished conquering one of the notorious 5 disaster gates, a place from where terrifying monsters emerged. But now, these bastards wanted to leave that gate open. They didn't want to finish the job. They wanted to make sure the monsters weren't completely wiped out, so they could return again and again. Why? Because as long as the danger remained, so did their jobs, their influence, and their status. If the monsters were gone, the spotlight would fade, and so would their power. Suho remembered all the time he had spent with them, fighting side by side in life-threatening battles, trusting them with his life. And now, they stood before him, watching him die without a shred of remorse. They justified their actions by saying Suho was the only one who had opposed the plan. Everyone else was on board. Then, the archer stepped forward and casually extended his hand, offering Suho a second chance. He said that if Suho agreed to join their side, they'd let him live. But Suho wasn't a fool. How could he trust people who had just poisoned him and stood back to watch him suffer? Besides, he could already feel it. His body had been pushed beyond its limits. The poison had spread too far. There was no coming back from this. His survival was impossible. But even if he couldn't live, he could still do one thing. Take at least one of these traitors down with him. With that, Suho began gathering all the energy he had left. A powerful aura erupted from him, sharp and overwhelming. A couple from the group was immediately paralyzed with fear, backing away in terror. But the woman in the group, even more frightened than the rest, tried to calm everyone down, insisting they shouldn't panic. The archer, clearly on the verge of losing control of his bladder, could tell this was bad, very bad. And then Suho moved. In a single swift motion, he charged forward. His blade slashed through the warrior's arm, and in the very next second, he beheaded the dark mage woman with deadly precision. The archer barely managed to retreat, dragging the healer with him. Their smug expressions, once full of arrogance, had completely vanished. In an instant, they were replaced by sheer horror. The healer quickly tried to save the wounded warrior, casting healing spells desperately. But nothing worked. To her shock, she realized she couldn't heal him at all. Her eyes turned to Suho. She saw something strange, something powerful. Suho was no longer just a dying man. He was overflowing with the power of will itself. And not just him. His sword had transformed too, now forged completely from that same indomitable will. It was called the Intangible Sword, a weapon born from pure determination. But that power came at cost. The energy that had kept him standing finally faded. Suho's strength gave out, and his body collapsed. He stumbled backward, falling off a cliff behind him. He dropped deep into the valleys below, disappearing from their sight, leaving behind nothing but silence. Suho slowly opened his eyes to the sound of chaos around him. There was shouting, sirens, and the distinct sound of people running. He was being carried by a firefighter, but he had no idea what was going on. His head was spinning, disoriented and foggy. Everything felt unreal, like a dream or a nightmare. The firefighter carrying him was rushing toward a designated safe zone, moving quickly through the crowded, panicked streets. Suho couldn't make sense of it first. The last thing he remembered was dying. He knew he had died. So how was he here? Alive, confused, and being rescued? Then something clicked. He noticed what was happening around him. A gate had opened, a pre-summoning gate. It had caused a dungeon outbreak. Monsters were swarming the area, more specifically, goblins. Dozens of them were running through the city, attacking anything in sight. As Suho looked around, he saw a familiar sign lying on the ground nearby, Syndrome Station. That's when it all made sense. His memories were correct. This was the exact station that had once been contaminated during a sudden gate outbreak. He had seen this happen before. Suddenly, out of nowhere, an arrow came flying through the air and struck the firefighter carrying him. The man let out a cry as he collapsed, and both he and Suho fell to the ground. The goblins were getting closer. Despite the pain, the injured firefighter looked at Suho and told him to run, now. But Suho didn't move. Instead of escaping, his eyes focused on the axe the firefighter had been carrying. Without hesitating, Suho grabbed it, took aim, and hurled it with all his strength at an approaching goblin. The weapon flew through the air and struck the goblin cleanly, taking it down in a single blow. And then, right in that intense moment, something strange appeared in front of Suho. Floating text, just like a digital display. It was a system window. It congratulated him on his awakening. For a second, he just stared at it, stunned. It was exactly like before, exactly as he remembered. The system asked him to choose the class he wanted to pursue. Out of reflex, his finger almost moved to select warrior. It was instinct. But then he paused. No, this time, he decided to delay his selection. Suho turned his attention toward the goblins, who were now cackling wildly, their screeches echoing across the battlefield. They looked completely unbothered, laughing like lunatics as if victory was already theirs. But Suho wasn't amused. Without wasting another second, he launched himself straight into the horde. His movements were sharp and effortless, weaving through incoming attacks like they were nothing more than a breeze. One goblin, eager to land a hit, tried to sneak up on him from the side, but the moment its eyes locked on his Suho, it froze in horror. Because right in front of it, Suho had just retrieved the same axe he had hurled earlier. The goblin recognized it instantly. Its face twisted in pure panic, and honestly, if goblins wore pants, that one probably would have pissed itself right there. But Suho didn't care. He wasn't here for theatrics. Before the creature could even let out a scream, Suho slashed it down in one clean motion, cutting it off before it could make the area even more disgusting than it already was. He didn't stop there. Grabbing one of the goblins' sword from the ground, he kept moving. He knew exactly what he was dealing with. Goblins were dangerous, sure, but only to beginners. To someone like him, a veteran who had seen far worse, cutting down goblins was no challenge at all. For Suho, it was easy as duck. Suho continued slashing through the goblins, cutting them down one after another with a speed and precision that was even sharper than before. In just a few minutes, the entire wave of goblins had been completely wiped out. It ended so quickly, it almost felt unreal. As the dust settled, Suho looked down at the sword in his hands. He realized how easily he had gotten carried away. In that moment, he wasn't calm or calculating. He had acted purely on instinct and emotion. And while that raw power was useful, he knew that during times like these, what he really needed was a cool head. But then again, if he wasn't mistaken, he had been brought back to the past for a reason. This was a second chance, a rare opportunity to start everything over from scratch. And he wasn't going to waste it. Suddenly, several system windows popped up in front of him, congratulating him for mastering multiple swordsmanship skills. But just then, something else caught his attention. The firefighter nearby was staring at him, clearly curious. The way Suho had fought didn't go unnoticed, and the man couldn't help but wonder if this guy is a player. Suho simply gave a slight nod in response and turned his focus back to the system. He had made up his mind about his class selection. He would become a healer. With that decision made, Suho walked up to the firefighter and politely asked if he could take a look at his injury. The man looked a bit confused. Just moments ago, he had saved Suho, and now Suho was offering to heal him? It didn't quite add up, but Suho didn't hesitate. He activated his magic, healing light, and instantly, the warm glow of the spell began to take effect. In almost no time at all, the wound healed completely. The firefighter could hardly believe what he was seeing. How could Suho be a healer when he had just watched him take down an entire goblin wave like a trained swordsman? Before the man could ask more questions, another system window appeared. It was time for Suho to select a weapon from the arsenal. He didn't even hesitate. He knew exactly what he wanted. He picked out a beginner's sword, the same one he had used before, and began preparing himself to challenge the gate ahead. This sudden determination made the firefighter a little nervous, even panicked. The gate up ahead wasn't something to be taken lightly. But Suho had something important to rely on. He had acquired the swordsmanship talent before selecting a class. This was a key detail. Skills obtained based on innate talent could be used regardless of which class a player chose. And as the player leveled up, those skills and class skills also would continue to evolve and grow stronger. Suho recalled something. Isabella's Holy Spirit had been the top-tier upgrade of healing light. If only he'd possessed that kind of power back then, maybe things could have turned out differently. But this time, he was going to do things right. He had a clear plan. He would walk the path of both a swordsman and a healer. And as he remembered the faces of his former teammates, those scumbags who had betrayed and abandoned him, his resolve grew even stronger. He stepped closer to the gate, the one that had nearly killed him in his past life. Back then, he was weak, unprepared. But now, with the fundamentals of swordsmanship engraved in his very being, he knew he could handle it. Without a trace of hesitation, Suho began walking forward and stepped inside the gate. As Suho stepped through the entrance, he suddenly found himself standing in the middle of a dense, shadowy forest. Almost instantly, the system window appeared in front of him, displaying the name of the area, Green-Red. A strange name, but there wasn't much time to think about it. After walking for a short while, Suho stumbled upon the gruesome sight of multiple goblin corpses scattered across the forest floor. Judging by their positions and expressions, it looked like they had been running from something or someone far more terrifying than themselves. Their twisted bodies suggested fear, not just defeat. That's when Suho heard something, a low, guttural sound from nearby. He turned his head toward the source. And just like that, he recognized what was behind it. 2 towering hobgoblins dragging along the corpse of a creature they had hunted. These weren't the weak, annoying goblins he'd seen before. Hobgoblins were a whole different beast. Bigger, meaner, and more dangerous. And when they spotted Suho, their eyes lit up with excitement. To them, human meat was a rare treat. Without hesitation, they tossed their previous prey aside and pointed their jagged weapons at Suho, eager to tear into fresh flesh. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't have guessed, was that the human they were drooling over wasn't some ordinary prey. They were staring at a predator. The first hobgoblin charged forward, blade swinging fast, but it sliced nothing but air. Suho dodged it cleanly. He already knew he was underleveled for these enemies. His weapon wasn't strong enough to cut through their thick skin with ease, but he didn't need to rely on brute strength. He knew exactly where to strike. In one swift motion, he lunged straight at the first hobgoblin, aiming directly for its eye. The attack hit its mark. The creature let out a piercing screech, loud enough to rattle the forest trees. Suho, ever the soft-hearted one, ended the pain of the poor monster by killing it. But Suho never intended to kill it so quickly. His attack had been too effective that it was pure habitual mistake. He had hoped to use the creature to gain skills and experience from the fight, but accidentally ended it too soon. Turning toward the remaining hobgoblin, Suho decided to make proper use of this one. The second monster, furious over its fallen comrade, roared and charged forward, swinging its weapon wildly in rage. But Suho was calm. He focused, dodging each attack with careful footwork. The hobgoblin slashed left, then right, then again and again, but none of its blows landed. In this world, repeating the same action over and over could eventually lead to acquiring a skill related to it. Suho knew this. And sure enough, after evading several more attacks, a small grin formed on his face. He had obtained a dodge skill, but he wasn't done yet. Now he aimed for his second skill. Suho began parrying the incoming strikes, deflecting the blows with precise timing. Parrying wasn't just a basic move. It had deep roots in weapon-based combat and served as a foundation for many other advanced skills. It was essential, and Suho wanted it. After a few more successful parries, the system finally rewarded him again. He had gained the parry skill. Unfortunately, by then, the hobgoblin had already grown tired. It staggered, breathing heavily, clearly reaching its limit. And so, just like before, Suho gave it peace, this time by swiftly beheading it. It wasn't out of cruelty, just necessity. Now, with 2 fresh skills in hand, he was ready to fight more. He wanted to face more monsters, not for the thrill of battle, but to earn skills, gather experience points, and grow stronger. Outside the gate, the atmosphere among the waiting hunters was tense and frustrated. They had just found out that someone had entered their assigned gate without permission. The moment the news spread, curses began flying left and right. Most of them were angry and felt disrespected, grumbling about how someone had the nerve to step into their territory. Some were already making plans to teach this mystery intruder a lesson once they came back out. They weren't going to let it slide that easily. Meanwhile, not far from the gate, a firefighter was in the middle of a serious conversation. He was speaking with a few men in suits, people from the Hunter Association. They had come to investigate and were specifically asking about a hunter named Suho. The firefighter didn't hold back and told them everything he knew. From what he saw, Suho wasn't just some ordinary hunter. He had wiped out a horde of zombies on his own and even healed his wounds in the middle of the chaos. One of the officers listening to the report looked visibly surprised. He hadn't arrived late, yet somehow, by the time he got there, the goblins were already completely wiped out. And to top it off, the person responsible was supposedly a healer? He tried to brush it off at first, saying it wasn't possible. In their experience, healers didn't have the combat power to do something like this alone. But still, if this guy really managed to clear the gates solo, especially one full of goblins, then they couldn't ignore him. If he pulled it off, they would absolutely have to recruit him. Meanwhile, Suho was out in the field, busy hunting down hobgoblins and collecting experience points one after another. He moved quickly and efficiently, beheading multiple hobgoblins at once with ease. His attacks were clean, controlled. He deliberately spared one hobgoblin, letting it live. Just one glare from Suho was enough to make the monster bolt faster than Usain Bolt. But that was exactly what Suho had planned from the start. He wanted the creature to escape and bring back more of its kind. With a brief break in action, he decided to check his status. Thanks to the wave of hobgoblins he had just defeated, both his stats and skills had improved significantly. While looking at the pile of goblin corpses around him, another thought crossed his mind. There was still something useful left in those bodies. Inside the monsters, there were magic stones. These particular ones were D-grade magic stones, nothing too rare, but each one could sell for around 50,000 won. That was more than enough reason for Suho to take the time to collect them. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't bother with this kind of work. He didn't have the luxury to slow down. But right now, his financial situation was closer to a beggar than a hunter, so he wasn't going to let these stones go to waste. He began removing the stones from the fallen monsters one by one, carefully storing them all in his inventory. By the time he was done collecting the loot, he felt genuinely satisfied. This was a decent haul. But just as he was about to take a breath, that calm was interrupted. A sudden wave of pure killing intent hit him like a wall. When he turned to face it, about 30 hobgoblins were already approaching. Leading them was the same monster he had let go earlier, the one that had fled in terror. And now, with its confirmation, the entire group charged toward Suho all at once. But Suho didn't panic. Instead, he leapt into the air like a ninja, moving with the speed and precision of a trained assassin. Within moments, several hobgoblins had already fallen, their heads rolling across the ground. His movements were sharp and effortless, like cutting through butter. Then, as if rewarding his efforts, the system notified him that he had leveled up. New stat points were added to his profile, making him even stronger than before. With that power up in hand and enough experience gained, Suho decided there was no need to drag things out any longer. It was time to end this. He dove straight into the mob of enemies, slashing in every direction, clearing the horde with ruthless efficiency. At one point, a hobgoblin managed to charge him head-on, aiming to strike. But instead of fear, Suho's face lit up with excitement. He wasn't worried. If anything, he looked even more thrilled than before. The boss monster in this gate was a chief hobgoblin, and it was a level 20 enemy. As expected of a boss, it came charging in first, trying to land an attack, but it failed miserably. Right after that, a group of smaller monsters tried to pull a sneak attack from behind. But Suho, without even turning fully, reacted instantly and cut them down like it was nothing. That's when the boss monster switched tactics and used one of its skills, fear. The fear skill was nasty. It paralyzed the target and pushed them into a state of pure terror. The higher the skill level, the stronger its effect. And since this was a boss monster, that alone was enough of an explanation for how it could use such a powerful mental type skill, even inside a low-level gate. The real problem was, Suho didn't have any gear or skills that could protect his mind or resist mental attacks. At the moment, he had no way to directly counter it. The boss saw this as a chance to finish the fight and charged in to claim victory. But what it didn't know was that Suho wasn't some rookie. He was a veteran hunter who'd been through situations far worse. He knew exactly how to deal with this. Without hesitation, Suho gripped his blade with his left hand and deliberately cut himself. The sharp pain snapped him out of the fear-induced paralysis. The moment his mind cleared, he parried the boss's incoming strike. Then, instead of focusing on the boss right away, Suho made a quick decision. He turned his attention to the smaller monsters first. Within seconds, he moved through the battlefield, slicing down every last one of them. In just a short burst of action, he wiped out all the hobgoblins inside the gate, leaving no enemies behind except the boss itself. Before going back to face the chief hobgoblin, he took a moment to heal the wound on his left arm. Now, with the distractions gone and his body back in shape, it was just him and the boss. One-on-one. No more interruptions. And from the look on the monster's face, it didn't seem all that confident anymore. The fight between the two had begun, and they exchanged blow after blow. Suho gave it his all, swinging his sword with determination. But because of his relatively low level, none of his attacks seemed to deal any serious damage to the monster. It was becoming clear that a head-on approach wasn't going to work. Realizing this, Suho decided to change tactics. Instead of aiming blindly, he drove his sword straight into the monster's thigh, targeting a weak spot to slow it down. In response, the monster activated its fear skill once again, hoping to paralyze Suho and gain the upper hand. But this time it didn't work. Once a person overcomes fear, it loses its grip, and Suho had already faced it once and conquered it. Now that he was no longer affected, Suho focused all his attacks on that same spot. He slashed the injured thigh over and over again, relentlessly exploiting the weakness. After a few more precise and forceful hits, the boss monster finally collapsed to the ground, barely alive, clearly on the brink of death. But Suho wasn't finished yet. Instead of going for the final blow, he suddenly used his healing light, a skill meant to restore health, and he used it on the monster. The creature, already confused and half dead, was now completely thrown off. It couldn't understand why the human who had nearly killed it was now trying to heal it. Suho, on the other hand, was delighted. He had just realized he could keep the fight going. By repeatedly attacking and healing the monster, he could extend the battle and use it as training. Some time passed in this strange cycle: attack, injure, heal, repeat. And with every round, Suho grew stronger. His skills steadily improved, and eventually he upgraded several of them to A and B ranks. Meanwhile, the boss monster, once proud and terrifying, was now covered in pure fear. It couldn't even bring itself to look at Suho anymore. Now that Suho had learned everything he could from this place, there was nothing left to gain. The monster's role in this trial was finished. It had served its purpose. With a calm expression, Suho ended it all, beheading the monster without hesitation. Just like that, the gate had been conquered. Suho stood victorious. He was declared the MVP of the gate, gaining bonus experience on top of everything else. His level had now reached 10, a significant milestone for any hunter. Even his healing skill, Healing Light, received an upgrade, advancing to E rank. And along with that, he acquired a brand new skill, Cure. It might not seem like much now, but if his skills continued to develop at this pace, it wouldn't be surprising if, one day, he could neutralize even 10,000 types of poisons. It was only the beginning, but the path ahead was clearly promising. With everything wrapped up, it was time to move on. Suho turned toward the exit of the gate. Outside, the atmosphere was tense. The gate had started to tremble slightly, causing people to whisper and wonder, had the gate been cleared? Then, before anyone could guess further, Suho stepped out. He walked out calmly and confidently, as if the chaos behind him didn't matter. There wasn't a hint of exhaustion or discomfort on his face, just quiet composure. People around him stared, unable to figure out who he really was or what exactly he had done. And Suho didn't bother explaining. He simply let their curiosity grow. Soon after, multiple guilds rushed over. They had all come looking for the mysterious man who had conquered the gate alone. But Suho ignored every offer, every scout, every invitation thrown his way. He wasn't interested. Instead, he walked past them and landed right in front of a man in a formal suit. With a calm and confident tone, Suho greeted him. This man was no ordinary official. He was the team leader of the South Korean Hunter Association, Young Cholman. And judging by the confused look on his face, he clearly wasn't expecting to be greeted by the person behind the gate's conquest. The scene shifts to the South Korean Hunter Association, where team leader Cholman and Suho were sitting across from each other. On the surface, it looked like a standard registration meeting, but Cholman's mind was elsewhere. His thoughts kept drifting back to their earlier encounter. He remembered how they had first met, shaking hands casually, and how Suho had mentioned that he was already on his way to the Hunter Association anyway. At first, Cholman had assumed it was just for a license renewal, something experienced hunters did all the time. But as the conversation progressed, it became clear that Suho was actually there for initial registration. That caught Cholman off guard. He was still trying to process how someone like Suho, who was registered as a healer of all things, had managed to clear an entire gate all by himself. And the way Suho had acted? Calm, casual, munching on snacks like it was just another Tuesday. Chalman had gone over his aptitude test results again and again. Statistically, Suho seemed more like a warrior than a healer. The numbers didn't lie. He had the physical strength and combat instincts, not to mention the composure that you'd expect from a frontline fighter. It didn't make sense. While Chalman was lost in thought, Suho spoke up, snapping him out of it by asking if there was a problem. That brought Chalman back to focus. He began asking Suho a few routine questions, background, education, that sort of thing, and that's when more pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. We learned that Suho was a college dropout. He had been studying physical education before quitting. Most students from that department usually chose combat classes like warrior or archer if they enter the hunter field. But Suho had gone in a different direction. He had selected the healer class. And the reason? He just hated getting hurt. Then he went on to explain what had happened inside the gate. He described the sequence of events in a straightforward, almost detached way, though he left out one key detail, the fact that it had all been far too easy for him. He simply said he fought to survive, and that was that. But when Suho casually mentioned Chief Hobgoblins, Chalman stiffened. Something about that didn't sit right with him. Gates that produced Chief Hobgoblins weren't supposed to be easy. So Suho, noticing his discomfort, calmly opened his inventory. In the next moment, he dropped all the loot he had collected from the gate right onto the table. The items hit with a heavy thud, and Chalman was caught completely off guard. His eyes widened in shock, and for a second he almost panicked. These were the magic crystals Suho had collected after hunting hobgoblins. The smaller ones were from regular hobgoblins, while the larger, more refined one had come from the hobgoblin chief. Since Suho didn't really know their actual value, he politely asked the team leader if he could help get them processed. Even while trying to stay composed, Chalman couldn't take his eyes off the loot. It was a good haul. Regaining his composure, he looked at Suho seriously and asked if he truly wanted to become a hunter. When Suho nodded, that simple agreement sparked real excitement in the team leader's eyes. Trying to steady himself again, Chalman asked whether this decision was just made on impulse. But Suho responded with a calm smile and said, "No, it wasn't impulsive at all." While Chalman was still riding the wave of happiness from hearing Suho's answer, Suho shifted the tone slightly and began explaining his real reason. It wasn't about power or money. It was personal. He hated monsters, and he hated the gates they came from. As a child, he had lost his entire family during a gate shock. After that, he grew up in an orphanage completely alone. At first, he thought that killing monsters would help ease that deep frustration and pain inside him. But even after defeating several monsters, that knot in his chest never loosened. No matter how many he killed, the ache never went away. That's when he made a decision. He couldn't undo the past, but he could choose the kind of future he wanted to protect. He didn't want anyone else to suffer the way he did. He wanted to fight, not for revenge, but for safety, for people. He wanted to be out there, on the field, doing real work. And that's why he decided to become a hunter, not for any guild, but for the South Korean Hunter Association. Chalman was genuinely impressed by this answer. But as someone with experience, he also felt the need to explain the downsides. He told Suho honestly that the pay scale of the Hunter Association was significantly lower compared to what private guilds usually offer. But Suho didn't seem bothered by that at all. As long as he had free access to multiple gates, priority in entering them, and the authority to punish hunters who committed crimes, that was more than enough for him. Chalman could barely believe what he was hearing. You see, even though the Hunter Association technically has gate priority, they often end up auctioning those rights off to private guilds. And the reason is simple. No official wants to put their life on the line for a small government salary. Most people claim they join to help others, but the reality is they aim for stable, safe positions where they can earn quietly without ever having to step into a gate. That's why so many aim for administrative roles instead of field duty. But in Chalman's eyes, Suho felt different. He wasn't chasing safety or comfort. He was a rare type, a true patriot who wanted to be out on the front lines, protecting people. Someone who genuinely believed in civil service. The happiness was so overwhelming that for a moment, Chalman felt lightheaded. But he quickly snapped out of it and got back to the task of handling the magic crystals. Now, to take the official hunter exam, one has to first pass an aptitude test, with both a written and a practical exam. Unfortunately for Suho, this year's registration period had already ended, and the exam was scheduled for tomorrow. But fortunately for Suho, having brother Chalman on his side, since Suho had managed to conquer an entire gate by himself, there was a good chance they could pull some strings and get special approval from the higher-ups. That part wasn't the problem. What had concerned Chulman, though, was the written test. Clearing that with only 1 day of preparation? Almost impossible for a regular person. But Suho, being Suho, was confident. To him, if you ever get the chance to do something, you take it, no matter the circumstances. The only issue? Our boy was practically a beggar at this point. He didn't even have enough money to pay the exam registration fee. So, swallowing his pride, he asked if team leader Chulman could take care of the magic crystals for him. And Chulman, being the dependable guy he is, immediately took the task without a second thought. Right now, the only person Suho could fully rely on was his big brother Chulman, and he was genuinely grateful for that. After some time, they completed all the aptitude tests. Team leader Chulman then sent Suho the money they got from selling the crystals. In the next cut, Suho was munching through Chulman's food stash like he owned the place. Thanks to the magic crystals, he received 3 million won. And on top of that, since he registered as a civil servant hunter, he also got some tax exemption benefits. Still, that wasn't enough for him. He had one more request. He had heard the association had a library, and he wanted to cram a bit for the written test tomorrow. He politely asked if the team leader could allow him access, and of course, Chulman said yes with a smile. He even personally showed Suho the way to the library and told him he wouldn't need an employee card to enter. Before parting ways, Chulman wished him the best of luck for the exam. Suho watched him leave, quietly thinking how kind and reliable his brother still was. Deep down, he knew that one day, Chulman would definitely become the president of the association. And with that, we'll wrap up this part here. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment for the next part. It really helps me out, and trust me, I need all the support I can get. Anyway, take care of yourselves and stay happy, guys.